Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. Ta Coates' career at Marvel Comics has been nothing but a disaster. His run on Black Panther is considered to be one of the worst in the character's history, and his spin-off, which he recruited Roxane Gay to write, Black Panther World of Wakanda, is considered one of the worst comics in comic book history. And recently, Ta Coates' Black Panther and the Crew was canceled after the second issue. And the reason Marvel Comics said that they canceled Black Panther and the Crew for was because due to poor sales. And when you read the premise for this Black Panther and the Crew, you will realize how ridiculous the premise for this story is and why your Ta Coates really just needs a crew of writers to teach him the craft of comic book writing. Now, when you read the premise for your Black Panther and the Crew, it pretty much makes no sense. According to Ta Coates, he's trying to make a commentary on police brutality and Black Lives Matter through the story and the narrative of Black Lives Matter. But when you look at the way he structures the story, he pretty much shows you how little he understands science fiction, fantasy, or even how to use characters in a fiction setting. Now, according to Ta Coates, the Marvel Universe's New York City is being patrolled by robot police officers. And this point in the story makes absolutely no sense. Now, why would unionized police officers allow robots to take their jobs? Even in a fictionalized setting like the Marvel Universe, they need police officers to be human beings because police officers are the first responders and they are people who are a part of the community. So that part of the story makes absolutely no sense, especially when you realize that police unions would pretty much be fighting the whole concept of robot police officers being in the city. And these robot police officers who are patrolling New York City murder a civil rights leader. And we're supposed to believe that, and after this civil rights leader is murdered by these robot police officers, that Black Panther has to assemble a crew of superheroes that include Misty Knight, Storm, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and they're supposed to go out and try to solve the murder of this civil rights leader before the city explodes in a riot. Now, I look at that whole assemblage of characters for this case, and it clearly shows me that your Ta Coates just doesn't understand how to pretty much establish a plot line for a story or how to establish characters to use in a story, because the characters he uses just aren't a good fit for a story. It just looks like he wanted to take all of Marvel's black superheroes and pretty much shove them into a story, not looking to see how they fit into the story organically or how the characters would work together in a constructive manner. Now, I look at the whole Black Panther assembling the crew, and that pretty much makes no sense to me. Your Black Panther is the king of Wakanda, and according to your Ta Coates, your Black Panther already has his hands full dealing with a Wakanda that pretty much has fallen apart according to the issues in the run that he pretty much set up for Black Panther. So why is he going to be assembling a crew of heroes to deal with something in New York City? That point in and of itself pretty much makes no sense at all. And then the other point is the characters he pretty much assembles in this crew to help him solve this case. Now, your Misty Knight is a detective, so I can see her being there, but I do not see how Storm fits into this story. Again, this is a character who is a part of the X-Men. She controls the weather. I don't see how she fits into this story. I can see Luke Cage being a part of this, maybe Iron Fist, and I see this basically as a Luke Cage, Iron Fist kind of story. I do not see where Black Panther and Storm fit into this story, and that's one of the core reasons why I think this whole premise pretty much falls apart as it relates to the characters. He just doesn't understand how to use characters in a constructive fashion where they fit into the story organically. This and that premise he puts together pretty much make for a very clunky story, a very uneven story, and a story that pretty much most readers can't get into. You combine this with his whole storytelling approach, which is tell instead of show, and you're going to be dealing with a very slow paced comic. And then you look at this whole narrative that he's trying to push regarding Black Lives Matter, and you're going to get a comic that really does not sell superheroes to readers. And this is the big problem with your Tanishi Coates as it relates to comic book writing, because he just doesn't understand the craft of comic book writing. Comic book writing is a craft, and it takes a special skill to understand how to create the words that create the pictures that the artist draws and tell a story that allows the pictures to move. And your Tanishi Coates just doesn't know how to do this. No, he thinks that comic books are just like writing one of his political activist books like Between the World and Me, and that's not the case at all. When you're writing comic books, yes, there is some political commentary being made in some cases, but the way he makes the commentary is in a heavy handed fashion, similar to that of old World War II propaganda comics, not the way science fiction and fantasy comics tell a story. Now, when it comes down to science fiction and fantasy stories, you have to make your commentary between the lines. Masters like Gene Roddenberry knew how to do this, but your Tanishi Coates just doesn't understand how to do this. What he does is he's going to make this commentary about Black Lives Matter in the most heavy-handed fashion, and then while he's doing it, he's using characters like robot cops to do it, and that really doesn't really help his commentary, because it looks like you're trying to cop out by using these robot cops as a substitute for white cops, and using these robot cops as a way to avoid having your heroes deal with interacting with white men who are the villain that you want to put in the story, but you're too afraid to put in the story, and that's why the story pretty much falls apart. When I look at this whole Black Panther and the crew, it pretty much shows me that your Tanishi Coates really, again, needs more training in science fiction and fantasy writing, because it's clear to me from this he doesn't understand how to do it. Now, when it comes down to comic books, they're supposed to be an escape. They're supposed to take us into a fantastic world. They're supposed to take us into a fantastic adventure. They're supposed to take us away from our problems. And this is another problem that your Coates has with his writing. He's trying to bring us to a problem in a medium that was meant to be an escape. Superhero comics are not about bringing problems to people. People want problems, they'll go read a magazine like Emerge, or they'll read a magazine like Upscale, and they'll read about those issues there. People read comics to escape their problems. They read their comics to see muscle-bound people having fantastic adventures. And this is something your Tanishi Coates just doesn't understand about comics. He's trying to use them to push the message of Black Lives Matter. But if I want to read the message of Black Lives Matter, I'll go to the Black Lives Matter website. I'll go watch Black Lives Matter videos. I'm not going to pay $5 to watch Black Panther and Iron Fist and Luke Cage and Storm tell me the message of Black Lives Matter. No, they already have their own forum. In a comic book, people want that action. They want that adventure. They want to see good guys beating up on bad guys. They don't want to hear about police brutality or white cops or anything like that. That's not what people pay money for. And this is something your Coates just doesn't understand. And this is what many of the people who are behind that whole diversity SJW campaign just don't understand about fantasy. Now, I understand that that whole concept and premise that Tanishi Coates has, is the execution of it is extremely poor. However, the ideas for the story can work, and I've made them work myself. Now, in 2014, I wrote a novel called Isis: Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and in that novelette, I pretty much have a story where this black female scientist decides to inject herself with nanites to turn herself into a cyber goddess. And she does this because she wants to murder the goddess Isis and works towards taking humanity to the next step of human evolution. And in that story, I pretty much built up on some story points that were established in the previous story, Isis the Beauty Myth. And in that story, I also pretty much made it an event where the Isis character met the character of John Haynes, and they pretty much worked together towards taking down this cyber goddess in a story where I made a commentary on the Darwinism versus creationism argument, and I pretty much continued to build up the feud between Isis and Rahima Sanders. And I did all of this in a action-packed story that was under 80 pages. So I know that the premise works, but I know that Coates' execution of the concept is the problem, and the problem that prevents him from executing the concept is the fact that he has no background in writing fiction. When you have a background in writing fiction, you understand how to make the fantasy work in a way that makes it an escape for the reader, because the reader will understand your commentary if you put it between the lines, but if you put it in the reader's face, they're going to see it as preaching, they're going to get angry, and they're not going to have incentive to go out and buy the story. Again, readers buy comics and fantasy for an escape. They buy it to see those good guys beat those bad guys, and they buy it to get to see fantastic ideas and fantastic adventures. They don't buy it to see somebody tell me something that I have already seen on the 6 o'clock news. And this is something that Neshi Coates just doesn't understand about comic books. Comic books are about selling characters in stories. They are about giving people that escape, and they're also about just having fun. People read comics to get away from their lives, not have life thrown in their face. And this is one of the core reasons why Neshi Coates' career at Marvel has been a bust. Yes, he has a great resume of credentials, such as his National Book Award win for Between the World and Me, being a New York Times best-selling author, but that doesn't make him a comic book writer. A comic book writer is an individual who has the skills, talent, and craft to understand how to make words that become a picture that an artist can translate into panels on a page, and pretty much can write dialogue that can move those pages in a way that makes them feel animated and alive. It is a special skill that only a handful of writers have out here, and it's a skill that takes time to master, and a skill that many, even those in the comic book industry, don't appreciate, because if they had appreciated the craft of comic book writing, they wouldn't have recruited Neshi Coates to write these comics. They would have went out and hired someone like myself who understands the craft of comic book writing to write comics. And maybe if they had hired someone like myself, what would have happened is maybe you would have had that celebrated run on Black Panther, and maybe you would have stories that readers could get into and enjoy, instead of wasting money trying to publish material that most readers have absolutely no use for. If you like this channel, you can donate to it by donating to my Patreon and by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try out Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, you can do so by clicking the link in the description box for Amazon.com to pick it up in paperback or read it on Kindle. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, E-Steam, Little Girl Lost. The devilish diva helps a lost little girl find her way home in this devilishly funny E-Steam series adventure. Get E-Steam, Little Girl Lost in paperback and e-readers today.